In this video, we're going to go through some of WordPress's settings and configure a few that are good to set up right away. In WordPress 3.3, all these administrative menus have flyout menus, so you can see what's underneath them without clicking. And you can see we have a whole bunch of settings to look at here. So we'll start with General. We already set up my really fabulous blog, the title here, but we did not set the tagline. Just Another WordPress Site is the default. Not very exciting, so let's call it something else. It's really fabulous. This tagline is not shown by every theme, but in cases where it is shown, you might as well have something sensible in there. The WordPress address and site URL are a couple of settings that you can leave just as they are, but if you've ended up moving your WordPress installation around, sometimes these will be things that you'll need to revisit later. This is the email address that WordPress will use sending out things like new user notifications, as it says over here, and other administrative matters that are site-wide. They don't necessarily have anything to do with your particular user account and your specific interactions with WordPress as a user. You can change this if you like, or just leave it. We'll leave this unchecked. For now, we don't want anybody else registering on the website as WordPress users. This is associated with that same setting, and we can leave it in its default. The thing that I will change is the time zone. I'm going to change this to my own locale, which is way up here. Long list. There it is, Los Angeles. I changed this, and now WordPress knows where it is and can timestamp and date stamp all my content correctly. The date format and time format indicate how times and dates will be displayed by WordPress. The defaults are just fine for these. And if you want to indicate that your week starts on something other than Monday, you can change that here. Save those changes. And we'll move on to writing. These writing settings configure how the screen will be presented when you're actually writing content in WordPress. I leave pretty much all these in their defaults for now, and if we need to change them later, we will revisit them. The main thing that I change on this page is remote publishing. If you use the WordPress iPhone app or some other remote publishing method, if you're on a Mac, you might use MarsEdit or some other kind of remote publishing app. But anyway, if you use something like that, you will need to turn on this XML RPC setting, and that will let you post from something other than the WordPress user interface. For our purposes, there isn't a lot here that we need to change, so I will just save it and move on to reading. This is another area that I generally leave in its default for now. These settings configure what your visitors will see when they come and visit your blog. The defaults are pretty sensible, and for now we can just leave them and revisit if we need to, and move on to discussion. Discussion configures settings relating mostly to comments and other kinds of ways of leaving feedback on your blog. So what I usually do is turn off pingbacks and trackbacks by default. Trackbacks are especially prone to causing you spam headaches. We will look at other ways of dealing with trackbacks later, but as far as default settings for content, I turn this off. This checkbox, attempt to notify any blogs linked to from the article, is left off by default, which is sensible. Otherwise, WordPress will send little notifications out to every site that is linked in an article, and that can get to be a little slow. Allow people to post comments on new articles. If you're intending to include comments on your blog, you should probably leave this checked. But again, these are just defaults for your posts, so you'll be able to change them later on a per post basis. All these other things are related to comments, and we can leave these in their defaults for now and just save. Media. Media settings are related to your file uploads. I generally leave everything in its defaults here. You may want to change this location of your uploaded files, but again, not something I usually change. We can revisit these later as needed. Privacy, there's exactly one setting here, and it's the same one that you configured during the installation of allowing search engines to see your site or not. For now, we will leave this off. No need to save anything. And finally, permalinks. A permalink refers to the URL that each individual piece of content has. So there are a bunch of samples here. The default and the internal WordPress way of representing stuff is to use this query string with a post ID. This is fine, but it doesn't convey a lot of information either to your users or to search engines. So it is generally recommended that you change it to one of these other settings. Post name is a new one in WordPress 3.3, which lets you just use the title of the post or page right after the URL. In previous versions, you couldn't do this for performance reasons, and so you would see mostly things like this with the year and the date and then the title. You're going to have to decide for yourself what makes the most sense, but I do recommend that you select at least one of these defaults, and maybe you'll want to set up a custom structure using some of the tags that are available at this link on the WordPress Codex. Likewise, you'll be able to change things for your categories and tags. For now, I'm just going to choose post name and save this. Permalink structure updated. We are done. So now we have stepped through all the settings that are important to configure right away, and we can proceed.